My name is Kamara, and at 32 years old, my family thinks I am a failure. To them, I am the struggling writer who lives in a cramped apartment and clips coupons to survive. They think I scrape by on freelance gigs and pity money. They have no idea who I really am. As I sat in the plush leather seat of my Maybach waiting for a business partner outside a private airfield in Atlanta, my phone pinged. It was a notification from WhatsApp. You were added to the real Millers. I frowned. My brother Desmond must have tapped the wrong name. He probably meant to add his wife, Tiffany. I was about to exit the group when a message popped up from Tiffany. It was a photo of me from last Thanksgiving wearing a simple beige dress. The caption read, "Look at this rag. I bet she bought it at Goodwill by the pound." I can smell the mothballs through the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen. I did not exit. Instead, I started scrolling up. I read years of history. It was like opening a vault of pure hatred. There was a message from my mother Loretta from 3 years ago. It read, "I am so glad Kamara is not coming to the BBQ. She always brings that depressing energy. Plus, it is one less mouth to feed." I kept scrolling. There was a message from Desmond from the day my divorce was finalized. He wrote, "Finally. I knew he would dump her. Who could love someone that pathetic? I won the pool guys. Pay up. $50 each." I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the car. These were the people I spent holidays with, the people I bought gifts for, the people I loved. They had created a separate digital world just to tear me down. Tiffany, my brother's wife, was the worst. Her messages were relentless. She mocked my hair, she mocked my job, she mocked my lack of children. One message from last week stood out. She wrote, "We need to make sure Kamara does not sit near us at Grandma Hattie's birthday. I do not want her ruining the aesthetic of the photos. She looks so poverty-stricken. It is embarrassing for Desmond's image." I lowered the phone. I looked out the tinted window at the private jet taxiing on the runway. Desmond was a mid-level manager at a car dealership. Tiffany was a stay-at-home mom who spent her days curating a fake life on Instagram. They thought I was the embarrassment. They had no idea that the poverty-stricken sister they mocked was actually the founder of Velvet Inc., a crisis management firm that cleaned up messes for Fortune 500 CEOs and politicians. I did not just have money. I had power. I had $18 million in liquid assets and a contact list that could shut down Desmond's career with one phone call. But they did not know that. To them, I was just Kamara, the charity case. I took a deep breath. I did not cry. Tears are for people who are helpless, and I was far from helpless. I spent the next 20 minutes systematically taking screenshots. I captured the timestamps. I captured the names. I captured the cruelty. I saved everything to a secure cloud folder. Then I typed my reply. My hands were steady. I wrote, "Thanks for the receipts. I see you guys have been busy. See you at Grandma's." I hit send. Then I immediately left the group. 3 seconds later, my phone rang. It was Desmond. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined. Then a text popped up. "Kamara, it is not what you think. Let me explain." I ignored it. Then a call from my mother. Then a call from Tiffany. The phone was vibrating so hard it was dancing across the leather armrest. I picked it up and held down the power button until the screen went black. I pressed the intercom button to speak to my driver. "Thomas, take me to the office. I have some work to do." As the car pulled away, I picked up my encrypted work phone and dialed my executive assistant. "Sarah, I need you to run a full financial background check on Desmond Miller and Tiffany Miller. I want to know every debt, every loan, and every credit card balance. And Sarah, find out who holds the mortgage on their house in the suburbs. I want to buy it." I did not go home to my penthouse that night. Instead, I drove my beat-up Honda Civic to my parents' house the next morning. I needed to maintain the illusion. I wore an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt that had a small stain on the hem. I parked the Honda in the driveway right behind Desmond's leased BMW. My hands gripped the steering wheel. This house. The house where I grew up. The house where I always felt like the outsider. They did not know that I was the one who paid the property taxes every year anonymously. I set up a shell company to pay the county directly so my parents would not lose the home when my father retired. They thought it was a government subsidy program. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The moment I walked into the living room, the air was thick enough to choke on. They were all there, an ambush. Mom was sitting in her favorite armchair wringing her hands. Desmond was pacing by the fireplace. Tiffany was perched on the sofa looking like a victim. When I entered, Desmond stopped pacing. "Kamara," he started, his voice loud and defensive. "You really scared Mom, leaving the group like that, ghosting us. Do you have any idea how dramatic you are being?" I stared at him. "I am dramatic. You have a 9-year-old group chat dedicated to bullying me, and I am the dramatic one." Mom stood up, rushing over to grab my arm. Her grip was tight. "Oh, honey, stop it. You know how boys are. It is just locker room talk." Desmond did not mean any of it. He was just venting stress. "You are too sensitive. You always have been. You take everything so personally." I looked at my mother, the woman who birthed me. She had read those messages, she had participated, she had laughed when they called me a failure, and now she was telling me I was too sensitive. Tiffany chimed in from the sofa. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind of tone you use when talking to a toddler or a slow pet. "Kamara, look, we are sorry if your feelings were hurt, really. But you have to understand where we are coming from. We worry about you. You are 32, you have no husband, no real career, and you are living in that tiny apartment. Sometimes we just need a place to vent our frustrations because we have to support you so much. It is exhausting for us, you know. Support me." I wanted to laugh. I had not asked them for a dime in 10 years. But I bit my tongue. I needed them to keep underestimating me. Desmond pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "Look, Kamara. I am up for a big promotion at the dealership. Regional manager. If those screenshots get out, if you post them on Facebook or something out of spite, it could look bad. It could ruin my reputation." So that was it. They were not sorry. They were scared. "We drafted this up," Desmond said, pushing the paper toward me. "It is just a simple non-disclosure agreement, a family privacy pact. It just says that anything shared between family stays private. If you sign it, we can all move past this little misunderstanding and go back to being a happy family." I looked at the paper. It was poorly written, probably downloaded from a free legal website. It was insulting. But it was also an opportunity. If I signed this, they would think I was submissive. They would think they had won. They would let their guard down. And that was exactly what I needed for the birthday party. I looked at Tiffany. She was smirking. A tiny triumphant smirk that barely touched her eyes. She thought she had put the charity case back in her place. I picked up a pen from the coffee table. I tapped it against the paper. "You want me to sign this?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sound defeated. "Yes," Mom said, patting my shoulder. "Do it for the family baby. Do not be difficult." "Okay," I said softly. "I will sign it." Desmond let out a breath he had been holding. "Good. That is good, Kamara." But I added, pausing with the pen hovering over the signature line. "I have one condition." Tiffany narrowed her eyes. "What condition?" "I want to plan Grandma Hattie's 85th birthday party," I said. "I know you guys were going to hire a planner, but I want to do it. It will be my gift to her. Since I cannot afford to send her to Europe like Desmond, let me do this." Desmond laughed. A short, barking laugh. "You plan a luxury party, Kamara? You can barely afford to plan a trip to the grocery store." "Please," I said, looking down at my shoes. "I want to feel useful. I want to contribute." Tiffany exchanged a look with Mom. Then she shrugged. "Honestly, Desmond, let her do it. It saves us the hassle. If she messes it up, we can just say we tried to help her. Besides, it saves us money. Fine, Desmond said, waving his hand dismissively. Knock yourself out. Just do not make it tacky. No paper plates, Kamara. I signed the paper with a flourish. Done, I said. I promise. It will be a night no one will ever forget. I walked out of that house with the signed NDA in their hands and a smile on my face. They thought they had silenced me. They thought they had bullied me into submission. They had no idea that they had just handed the reins of the most important event of the year to the very person they had spent a decade tormenting. As I got back into my Honda, my work phone buzzed. It was Sarah. I opened the email. Attached was a PDF titled The Miller Debt Portfolio. I opened it. Desmond and Tiffany were drowning. They were leveraged to the hilt, 3 maxed-out credit cards, 2 car loans, and a mortgage that was 3 months behind. I dialed Sarah. Sarah, I said, my voice ice cold. Contact the bank that holds Desmond's mortgage. Tell them we want to buy the debt. I want to own the paper on their house by the end of the week. And Sarah, upgrade the budget for Grandma's party. I want the best catering, the best decor, and the biggest LED screens you can find. I have a presentation to make. The leather seats of Tiffany's leased Mercedes SUV squeaked as she took a sharp turn into the strip mall parking lot. I held on to the door handle, my face impassive behind my sunglasses. For the last 20 minutes, Tiffany had been talking non-stop about the color palette for Grandma Hattie's party. She wanted champagne gold and ivory. She wanted elegance. She wanted class. So when she parked the car in front of a faded sign that read Goodwill Donation Center, I knew exactly what game she was playing. We are here, Tiffany chirped, killing the engine. She turned to me with the bright plastic smile. Her teeth were perfectly white, likely another expense put on a credit card that was currently maxed out. I know we talked about going to the mall, Kamara, but I was thinking about your situation on the drive over. We need to be realistic. Department store dresses are hundreds of dollars. I just would not feel right letting you spend your rent money on a gown you will only wear once. I looked out the window at the donation bins overflowing with discarded clothes. So you brought me to a thrift store. It is vintage hunting, she corrected, opening her door. It is very trendy right now. Besides, nobody will be looking at what you are wearing anyway. You will be busy managing the catering staff and making sure the trash does not overflow. We just need something that blends in. You know, something that says humble service. I stepped out of the car. The humidity of the Atlanta afternoon hit me, carrying the faint scent of exhaust fumes. I adjusted my purse on my shoulder. It was a nondescript black bag, but inside was a phone that controlled assets worth more than this entire shopping center. Tiffany marched toward the entrance, her heels clicking on the cracked pavement. She wore a designer silk blouse and fitted trousers, creating a stark contrast to the peeling paint of the storefront. I followed her, playing the part of the obedient, destitute sister-in-law. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old laundry detergent. Rows of metal racks were stuffed with garments of every color. It was chaotic and crowded. Tiffany wrinkled her nose slightly, but quickly masked it with a look of determination. She beckoned me over to the clearance section in the back. Look at this, she said, pulling out a shapeless gray dress made of some scratchy synthetic material. It had a stain on the collar that looked like ancient coffee. This could work. It is very practical. And look at the price tag, $4. That is a steal, Kamara. I touched the fabric. It felt like sandpaper. Tiffany, it has a stain. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, a little club soda will get that right out. Or you can just wear a scarf. Stop being so picky. Beggars cannot be choosers, right? She laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my blood run cold. She did not wait for my response. She continued flipping through the rack, bypassing anything that looked remotely decent and zeroing in on the most unflattering dated items she could find. She pulled out a dress that looked like a bridesmaid gown from 1995. It was a dull, muddy brown color with puffed sleeves that had deflated over the decades. This is it, she declared, holding it up against my body. It is perfect. It covers everything up. You know, since you have gained a little weight since the divorce. This will hide all those problem areas. I had actually lost weight since the divorce. I was in the best shape of my life, training with a private instructor 3 times a week. But Tiffany needed to see me as broken, so she hallucinated flaws that did not exist. "I will try it on," I said quietly. As we walked toward the fitting rooms, a sales clerk approached us. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, but when she saw Tiffany, she straightened up. Tiffany had that effect on people. She projected an aura of authority and wealth that made people want to please her. "Can I help you ladies with anything?" the clerk asked. "Yes, actually," Tiffany said, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. She gestured toward me with a manicured hand. "I am helping my sister-in-law find a dress for a very important family function. She has fallen on hard times recently, you know how it is. We are trying to find something nice, but very affordable." The clerk looked at me. Her eyes swept over my simple jeans and t-shirt. Then she looked back at Tiffany with a soft, understanding expression. That distinct look of pity that white women sometimes exchange when discussing a charity case. "Oh, that is so sweet of you," the clerk said to Tiffany. "You are a good friend to help her out. We have a half-off rack for items with minor defects if you want to look there." "Thank you," Tiffany beamed. "You are an angel. We will definitely look there." She wants to look presentable, even if she is just helping out in the kitchen. I stood there silent. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. They were talking about me as if I were a child or a pet that had been kicked to the curb. Tiffany was feeding off the clerk's admiration. She was the benevolent savior guiding the poor, hopeless Kamara through the racks of discarded clothing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, one single sharp vibration. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from Tiffany's prying eyes. It was a message from my lawyer, David. The preview text was short. "Acquisition complete. The bank accepted the transfer. You are now the sole holder of the mortgage for 42 Oak Creek Drive." A small smile touched the corner of my lips. 42 Oak Creek Drive. The house Tiffany slept in. The house where she hosted her book clubs. The house she bragged about on Facebook. I owned it. Every brick, every beam, every inch of the manicured lawn she was so proud of. I owned the roof over her head. The anger in my chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, thrilling sense of power. Let her have her moment in the thrift store. Let her drag me through the mud. Every insult she threw at me was just another line item on the bill I would present to her later. Kamara Tiffany snapped her fingers in front of my face. "Are you listening? The lady said the fitting rooms are open. Go try on the brown dress." I looked up at her. The pity was gone from my eyes. I blinked, resetting my expression to one of docile gratitude. "Oh, sorry. I was just checking the time. I will go try it on." I walked into the cramped fitting room and pulled the curtain shut. The mirror was cracked in the corner. I slipped off my shirt and pulled on the brown dress. It was hideous. The polyester scratched my skin. The sleeves were ridiculous. The color made me look washed out and sick. It was exactly what Tiffany wanted. She did not want me to look like a guest. She wanted me to look like a mistake. I stepped out of the fitting room. Tiffany gasped, bringing her hands to her mouth. "Oh, Kamara," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. It is really something. It definitely fits the budget. And honestly, with your hair pulled back, nobody will even notice the missing button." I looked in the three-way mirror. I looked like a tragedy. "I love it." I lied. "It is perfect for cleaning up after the party." "Great," Tiffany said, checking her watch. "Let's get it. I have the nail appointment in an hour and I cannot be late. My nail tech is fully booked for weeks." We walked to the counter. The total came to $4.50. I reached into my purse and pulled out a $5 bill. Tiffany watched me, making no move to pay. She had just spent $200 on a lunch she didn't invite me to, but $4 for my dress was apparently where she drew the line. "That was so lucky," Tiffany said as we walked back to the car. "I am glad we found something. You know Desmond was worried you might show up in jeans. This shows you are really trying to be part of the family again." I climbed into the passenger seat of her Mercedes. As she started the engine, a notification popped up on the dashboard screen. It was a reminder from her calendar: mortgage payment due, past due. Tiffany frowned and quickly swiped the notification away, glancing at me to see if I had noticed. I stared straight ahead, clutching the plastic bag with my $4 dress. I noticed Tiffany. I noticed everything. "Do you want to stop for coffee?" she asked, turning the car onto the main road. "I am dying for a latte." "No thanks," I said. "I should get home. I have a lot of work to do for the party." "Suit yourself," she said, turning up the radio. As we drove, she hummed along to a pop song, tapping her manicured fingers on the steering wheel. She felt powerful. She felt superior. She thought she had stripped me of my dignity by dressing me in rags. She didn't know that the person sitting next to her held the power to evict her from her life. I looked down at the plastic bag in my lap. I would wear the dress. I would wear the brown, scratchy, ugly dress. I would play the part of the charity case one last time. Because when I finally took off the mask, I wanted the shock to be absolute. I wanted them to remember this moment. I wanted them to remember how they treated me when they thought I had nothing. Because soon they would realize that the only thing poverty-stricken about this family was their character. And unlike my bank account, their moral bankruptcy was something no amount of money could fix. "Drop me off at the corner," I told her as we neared my apartment block. "You do not need to drive all the way in." "Are you sure?" Tiffany asked, though she was already slowing down. "I do not mind." "It is fine," I said. "The Honda is parked on the street anyway." I got out of her luxury SUV, clutching my Goodwill purchase. I watched as she sped away, eager to get away from the scent of failure she thought clung to me. I waited until her taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant. "Sarah," I said, "send a notice to the new debtors. Tell them the new owner of the mortgage is reviewing their file due to missed payments. Do not use my name yet. Just use the holding company. Let them sweat a little before the party." I walked toward my Honda, the gravel crunching under my boots. The brown dress felt heavy in the bag, not like a garment, but like a weapon. I tossed it into the back seat. Chapter 3 was over. The humiliation was complete. Now it was time to set the stage for the main event. Grandma Hattie's party was going to be spectacular, and Tiffany Miller was going to be the star of a show she never auditioned for. The dining room table looked less like a place for a family meal and more like a corporate war room. Tiffany had spread out color-coded spreadsheets, vendor contracts, and a seating chart that looked as complex as a battle plan. My mother Loretta sat at the head of the table, sipping iced tea and looking at my brother Desmond with eyes full of adoration. I sat at the far end near the kitchen door, a spot they had subconsciously assigned to me years ago. "All right," Desmond said, leaning back in his chair and clasping his hands behind his head. He looked like a man who had just conquered a nation rather than a mid-level manager who was technically insolvent. For Grandma's big 85th, Tiffany and I decided to go big. I mean really big. We are sending her to Europe. Mom gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Oh, Desmond. Europe. That is incredibly generous." Desmond nodded, soaking in the praise like a lizard on a warm rock. 2 weeks. First-class tickets. Paris, Rome. London. The works. She deserves to see the world in style before you know she gets too old to move around. I kept my face perfectly still. I knew exactly which credit card Desmond was planning to use for this. It was the Platinum Rewards card issued by the very bank my holding company had acquired a controlling stake in last month. I knew that card had a limit of $20,000, and as of this morning he was already at $19,500. The transaction for these tickets would be declined faster than he could say, "Bon voyage." But I said nothing. I just let him build his castle in the sky. "That is wonderful, Desmond," I said, my voice flat. "Grandma will love the idea of it." Tiffany shot me a sharp look. "The idea of it? She is going to love the reality of it, Kamara." Unlike some people, Desmond actually follows through on his promises. Mom reached out and squeezed Desmond's hand. "You are such a good grandson. You have always been the provider of this family. Hattie is going to be so proud. Then the room went quiet. The air grew heavy. I knew this moment was coming. It was the moment they pivoted from praising the golden child to shaming the scapegoat. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. So, Tiffany said, tapping her pen against the mahogany table. That brings us to you, Kamara. I took a sip of water. What about me? Well, Tiffany sighed, glancing at her spreadsheet as if searching for a line item that did not exist. We know things are tight for you, especially after the divorce. We obviously do not expect you to match Desmond's gift. We do not want you to embarrass yourself by trying to buy something cheap that will just end up in the trash. I appreciate that, I said. However, Mom interjected, sitting up straighter. You need to contribute something, Kamara. You are still a Miller even if you are living unconventionally. It would look very bad to the guests if you showed up empty-handed. It reflects poorly on us. I have a gift in mind, I said. Tiffany laughed. A short, dismissive sound. Let me guess. A handwritten poem. A knitted scarf. Kamara. This is a black tie event. We have senators coming. We have business leaders. We cannot have you handing Grandma a macaroni art project. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, but I pushed it down. I thought about the deed to the house in my safe. I thought about the trust fund I had already set up in Grandma's name, ensuring she would never have to rely on these vultures again. So Tiffany continued, a cruel smile spreading across her face. We came up with a solution. Since you cannot contribute financially, you can contribute labor. It is a way for you to pay your respects without costing you a dime. Labor, I asked. Yes, Desmond said, picking up a grape from the fruit bowl. We need a cleanup crew. You know, to handle the breakdown after the party ends. The catering staff is expensive for overtime, and honestly, we do not want strangers handling the leftover food or the gifts. You want me to be the janitor, I stated. Do not call it that, Mom snapped. It is service. It is an act of love. You will stay after the guests leave. You will bag up the trash, wipe down the tables, sweep the venue, and load the gifts into Desmond's car. It saves the family about $500 in cleaning fees. That can be your gift to Grandma. Saving us money. I looked at them, really looked at them. Desmond with his counterfeit Rolex, Tiffany with her passive-aggressive spreadsheet, Mom with her desperate need to maintain appearances. They wanted to reduce me to the help. They wanted me to be on my knees scrubbing floors in my Goodwill dress while they drove off into the night with the credit for a party I paid for. They expected me to fight. They expected me to cry or storm out. That is what the old Kamara would have done. But then a memory washed over me. I was 10 years old. I was sitting on the back porch crying because Mom refused to give me $20 for the Scholastic Book Fair. She had told me reading was a waste of time and that I should focus on learning how to cook so I could find a husband one day. Grandma Hattie had come out smelling of peppermint and old paper. She did not say a word. She just reached into her bra and pulled out a crumbled, warm $20 bill. She pressed it into my hand and whispered, You fill that head of yours, baby. Once you have knowledge, nobody can take it away from you, not even your mama. Grandma Hattie was the only one who saw me. She was the only one who knew I was destined for more than this toxic fishbowl. And for her, I would sweep every floor in Atlanta. I looked back at Tiffany. Her eyes were gleaming, waiting for my humiliation. Okay, I said softly. Excuse me. Tiffany blinked, surprised by my surrender. I said okay. I will do it. I will be the cleanup crew. I will handle the trash. I will make sure everything is spotless after the party. Desmond smirked. See? That was not so hard. Finally knowing your place. That is growth, Kamara. Mom nodded approvingly. Good. That is settled then. Just make sure you bring a change of clothes. We do not want you ruining that dress you bought, even if it was cheap. You can change in the utility closet once the guests start leaving. I stood up. Is that all? Yes, Tiffany said, making a check mark on her list. Oh, and Kamara. Try to stay in the background during the actual party. We have assigned you a table near the kitchen entrance. It is better for logistics if you are close to the service area anyway. I picked up my purse. The black leather felt cool under my fingers. I walked to the door, stopping just before I exited. I will see you at the party, I said, turning back to face them one last time. And regarding my gift? Desmond groaned. Kamara, we just agreed. The cleaning is the gift. Do not bring some cheap trinket. I smiled, a slow, genuine smile that did not reach my eyes. Do not worry, Desmond. My gift will be small. It fits in an envelope. But I promise you it is something Grandma has wanted for a very long time. And it is something none of you will ever forget. I walked out before they could ask what I meant. As I got into my car, I checked my phone. My assistant had sent me a confirmation image. It was a digital copy of the foreclosure notice for Desmond's house, set to be delivered via process server exactly 1 hour after the party ended. But the real gift for Grandma was in my other pocket. The amended will. The one that cut them all out and left the entire estate to the only person who actually loved her. I drove away from the house, the sun setting behind me. They wanted me to clean up, fine. I would clean up. I would clean up the lies. I would clean up the abuse. And when I was done, there would not be a single speck of their entitlement left. I turned up the radio. The song playing was about retribution. I hummed along. Being the janitor was going to be the best job I ever had. The week before the party, the atmosphere in my parents' house was vibrating with tension. Tiffany had turned the dining room into her command center. There were mood boards leaning against the china cabinet and stack of RSVP cards that she was sorting into 2 piles. The pile on the left was small, the pile on the right was massive. I stood by the doorway holding a tray of coffee I had just brewed for her, playing the role of the dutiful assistant perfectly. Here is your coffee, Tiffany, I said, setting the mug down on a coaster so I would not ruin her precious table. She did not look up, she just waved a hand at the stack of cards on the right. Look at this, Kamara. We have confirmations from the HOA president and the pastor. This is going to be the social event of the season. Everyone who is anyone in our community will be here. I nodded. It looks very impressive. It is curated, she corrected, finally taking a sip of the coffee. She grimaced slightly as if the coffee made by a poor person tasted less expensive. That is the word, Kamara. Curated. We are creating an environment of excellence. Which brings me to a small issue. She picked up a piece of paper from the floor and held it up with 2 fingers as if it were a dirty tissue. I saw you added 2 names to the guest list in pencil, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Julian Hayes and Marcus Thorne. Who are these people? They are friends of mine, I said calmly. I thought it would be nice to have a few people there who know me. Tiffany laughed. It was a sharp barking sound that made my skin crawl. Friends of yours? Kamara, be serious. This is a black tie affair. The plates cost $100 a head. We are serving filet mignon and lobster tails. We are not serving fried chicken and Kool-Aid. I felt the heat rise in my neck at the microaggression, but I kept my face neutral. What does that have to do with my friends? It has everything to do with them, she snapped. Look, I know you hang out with a certain crowd, people who are struggling, people who are loud. We cannot have your friends showing up here in jeans, eating up all the food and asking guests for money. It ruins the aesthetic. We are trying to impress Desmond's boss. We are trying to show that the Millers are a family of status. We cannot have riffraff wandering around the venue. Riffraff. That is what she called them. Julian Hayes was the youngest state senator in Georgia's history. He was currently spearheading a bill on economic reform that I had helped draft during a crisis management session last year. Marcus Thorne was the CEO of Thorne Tech, a company that had just gone public with a valuation of $4 billion. He was my jogging partner on Tuesdays. These men did not just have status, they defined it. If they walked into a room, Desmond would be lucky to shine their shoes. But Tiffany did not know that. She just saw names she did not recognize and assumed that because they were associated with me, they must be nobodies. I understand, I said, lowering my head submissively. I did not mean to impose. It is just that, well, I was worried about the staffing. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. What about the staffing? You mentioned the catering company charges extra for servers to pass the hors d'oeuvres and refill the champagne, I said. And since the budget is already tight because of Desmond's credit card limit, I thought we could save money. Tiffany's ears perked up at the mention of saving money. Go on. Julian and Marcus. I lied smoothly. They are not coming as guests. They are coming as volunteers. They owe me a favor for helping them with some resume writing. They offered to work the floor for free. You know, holding the trays, refilling water glasses, cleaning up spills? Tiffany sat back in her chair, her eyes widening. Wait, you are telling me these two men are willing to work as servers for free, just because they are your friends? Yes, I said. They are very hard workers. They are used to manual labor. They will wear the white gloves and the bow ties. You will not even have to feed them the steak dinner. They can eat sandwiches in the back with me. A slow, greedy smile spread across Tiffany's face. She tapped her chin. That would save us about $600 in labor costs. And if they are wearing uniforms, nobody will know they are your friends. They will just look like the hired help. Exactly, I said. They will be invisible. Tiffany clapped her hands together. Okay. Fine. You can bring them. But Kamara, you make sure they are groomed. I do not want any unkempt hair or saggy pants. If they embarrass me, I am kicking them out personally. Do you understand? I understand, Tiffany. They will be on their best behavior. Good, she said, returning to her mood board. Now go take the trash out. The bin in the kitchen is overflowing. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of Tiffany's expensive perfume fading into the smell of garbage. I pulled out my phone and opened a group chat named The Power Circle. It only had 3 members, me, Julian, and Marcus. I typed a message. She took the bait. The operation is a go, but you guys have to wear the waiter uniforms. A second later, Julian replied, a senator pouring water for a car salesman. This is going to be the highlight of my career. I cannot wait to see his face when I hand him a napkin. Marcus replied with a laughing emoji. I just bought a $3,000 tuxedo for this Kamara. But for you, I will wear the apron. I want front row seats when you drop the bomb on them. I smiled, watching the 3 dots of their typing bubbles. My friends were not just wealthy, they were petty. And they loved me. They were willing to humble themselves to be treated like servants just to help me execute the perfect revenge. I tied up the trash bag and hauled it outside to the curb. As I tossed it into the bin, I looked back at the house. I could see Tiffany through the dining room window, gesturing wildly at Desmond, probably bragging about how much money she had just saved on staffing. She thought she was exploiting my poverty. She thought she was getting free labor from desperate men. She had no idea that the man she would be snapping her fingers at to fetch her more wine could buy her husband's entire dealership with the cash he carried in his wallet. The irony was delicious. Tiffany was so obsessed with appearance, with looking rich, that she was about to treat actual billionaires like dirt. And that behavior would be her undoing. Because in my world, the real power moves in silence. And the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the least amount of leverage. I went back inside, washing my hands at the sink. Did you take care of it? Tiffany yelled from the other room. Yes, I called back. Everything is taken care of. I dried my hands on a paper towel. The stage was set. The players were in position. The uninvited guests were coming, and they were bringing a storm with them. All I had to do now was wait for the curtain to rise. Desmond stood in the lobby of First National Bank like he owned the building. He was wearing his best navy blue suit, the one he saved for days when he needed to intimidate people, and he was tapping his platinum credit card against the marble counter. He was there to withdraw $5,000 in cash for the deposit on the luxury vintage car he planned to rent for Grandma Hattie's entrance. It was an unnecessary expense, of course. Grandma would have been happy arriving in a comfortable sedan. But Desmond needed the spectacle. He needed the neighbors to see a Rolls-Royce pulling up to the venue. He needed to project an image of limitless wealth. "I can help you over here, sir," a young teller said, waving him over. Desmond strutted to the window. He did not smile. He slid the card across the counter with 2 fingers. 5,000. Large bills. And make it quick. I have a meeting with my broker in 20 minutes. He did not have a meeting with a broker. He had a meeting with a sandwich shop for lunch. But Desmond lived his life in a constant state of performance art. The teller swiped the card. She typed something into her keyboard. Then she frowned. She swiped it again. "Is there a problem?" Desmond asked, checking his watch theatrically. "One moment, sir," she said. Her voice had lost its customer service warmth. She typed again, faster this time. Then she picked up the phone next to her station and whispered something that Desmond could not hear. Desmond huffed. "Look, if the machine is broken, just run it manually. I do not have all day." "Sir," the teller said, putting the phone down, "I am getting a notification here. This account has been frozen due to suspicious activity and a credit review initiated by the primary lien holder." Desmond laughed. A loud, incredulous bark. "Frozen? That is impossible. I have a credit limit of $20,000. I am a preferred client." "Run it again." "I cannot run it again, sir. The system has locked the account. It says your debt-to-income ratio has triggered an automatic freeze pending a full audit." Desmond's face went from smug to purple in 3 seconds. He slammed his hand on the counter. "This is ridiculous. I want to speak to your manager. This is a mistake. Somebody must have tampered with my account." While Desmond was causing a scene in the lobby, screaming about incompetent employees and demanding justice, I was sitting 20 floors up in the same building. The executive suite of First National Bank smelled of mahogany and fresh orchids. I was sitting on a velvet sofa holding a porcelain cup of Earl Grey tea. Sitting across from me was Mr. Henderson, the regional vice president of the bank. He was looking at a tablet, scrolling through a file. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. "Or should I say, Miss CEO of Velvet Inc. It is a pleasure to finally meet the person behind the holding company. We have processed your acquisition of the debt portfolio as requested." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said, taking a calm sip of tea. "I trust everything is in order regarding the audit." "Yes," he said, "we noticed significant irregularities in the borrower's spending habits. Luxury travel, high-end fashion dining, all while minimum payments were barely being met. As the new majority creditor, your request to freeze unsecured credit lines until the audit is complete was automatically approved." "Excellent," I said. Just then my phone began to vibrate on the glass coffee table. I glanced at the screen. It was Desmond. Mr. Henderson looked at the phone, then back at me. He raised an eyebrow. "Is that the borrower?" I smiled. "Yes. Do you mind if I take this? It might be important. Please," he said, gesturing with his hand. "Be my guest." I picked up the phone and swiped answer. "Hello, Kamara." Desmond screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You thief! You jealous, petty little thief, Desmond," I asked, keeping my voice full of innocent confusion. "What is going on? Why are you shouting? Do not play dumb with me," Desmond roared. "I am at the bank. My card is frozen. My account is locked. The teller is saying something about a credit audit. Nobody has access to my social security number except family. You are the only one who would do this." I sighed, leaning back into the velvet cushions. "Desmond, why would I do that? I have been cleaning the venue all morning. I do not even know your bank details." "You stole them," he accused. "You probably dug through my trash or went through my wallet when you were at the house. You are trying to sabotage me because you are jealous that I am taking Grandma to Europe, and you are just the janitor." I looked at Mr. Henderson. He was struggling to suppress a laugh. He took a sip of water to hide his smile. "Desmond, listen to yourself," I said calmly. "You sound paranoid. Maybe the bank just realized you are overextended. Have you been spending a lot lately? I know Tiffany bought that $3,000 purse last week. Maybe you just hit your limit." "I did not hit my limit," he shrieked. "I am a VIP. This is identity theft. I am going to call the police, Kamara. I swear to God, if I find out you hacked my account, I will have you arrested. I took another sip of tea. The warmth spread through my chest, soothing and victorious. Go ahead and call them Desmond, but if I were you, I would worry less about me and more about how you are going to pay for that deposit. Do you have cash? Desmond sputtered. That is none of your business. Fix this Kamara. Unfreeze it. I cannot unfreeze your account, Desmond. I am just a freelance writer, remember. I do not have any power. There was a silence on the other end. Heavy breathing silence. He knew I was right, but his ego would not let him accept it. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, and he was lashing out at the only person he thought was weaker than him. You are useless, he spat finally. Absolutely useless. Just stay out of my way. The line went dead. I set the phone down gently on the table. Family trouble? Mr. Henderson asked politely. Something like that, I said. He seems to be having a bad day. Mr. Henderson tapped his tablet screen. Well, it is about to get worse. Security just alerted me that he is refusing to leave the teller window and is disturbing other clients. They are escorting him out now. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the street below. A minute later, I saw a tiny figure in a navy blue suit being guided out of the bank's revolving doors by two large security guards. Desmond looked small from up here. He looked powerless. He was waving his arms, shouting at the wind, completely unaware that his sister was watching him from the sky. He walked toward his leased BMW, kicked the tire in frustration, and then got in. Mr. Henderson, I said, turning back to the room, proceed with the full audit and accelerate the foreclosure timeline on the house. I want the notice to arrive exactly 1 hour after the party ends. Consider it done, Mr. Henderson said. I picked up my purse. I had a party to finish planning. And now that Desmond's credit was frozen, I had a feeling the catering budget was about to get a sudden mysterious upgrade, courtesy of an anonymous donor. Desmond wanted a spectacle. I was going to give him one. But the applause would not be for him. The polyester uniform scratched against my skin like steel wool. It was 2 sizes too small, a generic maid outfit that my mother Loretta had found in the back of a closet. The black fabric was faded, and the white apron had a permanent yellow tint to it. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling the tight collar digging into my neck, while my mother circled me like a judge at a livestock show. Turn around, Loretta commanded, flicking her hand. Slower, Kamara. I need to see if it looks presentable from all angles. I rotated slowly, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I was the owner of an $18 million company. I was on the board of directors for 3 charities. I had a closet full of Italian silk and French lace. But here in this house, I was a doll being dressed up to play the part of the servant. It is a bit tight around the hips, Mom said, stopping in front of me and frowning. She poked my waist with a manicured finger. You have let yourself go, Kamara. I told you that cheap food you eat would catch up with you. You look lumpy. I held my breath. I am a size 6, Mom. The dress is a size 4. Do not talk back, she snapped. It is not the dress's fault. It is your lack of discipline. Look at Tiffany. She has had a baby, and she is still a size 2. That is what class looks like. Speaking of the devil, Tiffany glided into the room. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and white linen trousers. She looked effortless, expensive, and completely out of place in the same room as me. She was holding a large glass of red wine filled dangerously close to the rim. Oh my God! Tiffany squealed, bringing a hand to her mouth. She did not look horrified. She looked delighted. Mom, look at her. It is perfect. She looks exactly like the help. Mom beamed at Tiffany, her face transforming from critical to adoring in a split second. Does she not? I was just telling her she needs to suck in her stomach, but otherwise it will do. We just need to make sure she stays in the dim lighting of the kitchen most of the night. Tiffany circled me now, joining in the inspection. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes dancing with malice. You know, Kamara, this is actually a good look for you. It is humble. It suits your station in life. Maybe after the party you can keep the uniform. You could probably pick up some cleaning shifts at the mall for extra cash. I stared straight ahead, focusing on a spot on the wall. The plan, I told myself. Stick to the plan. Every insult is fuel. Is the apron straight? Tiffany asked, reaching out to tug at the fabric. She pulled it hard, jerking me forward slightly. Tiffany, be careful, I said, regaining my balance. She laughed. Relax. I am just fixing you. You look like a mess. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of expensive Merlot and heavy perfume filled my nose. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my face with pure contempt. You really are lucky we are letting you do this, she whispered, low enough so Mom could not hear the venom, but loud enough for me to feel it. Most families would have disowned a failure like you by now. We are giving you a purpose. You should be thanking us. I remained silent. Say thank you, Kamara, Tiffany hissed. I looked her in the eye. Thank you, Tiffany, she smirked. Good girl. Then she took a step back. As she did, she pretended to stumble on the edge of the Persian rug. It was a terrible performance. Her foot barely grazed the carpet, but she threw her upper body forward with exaggerated force. The glass of red wine tipped in her hand. It happened in slow motion. The dark crimson liquid arched through the air and splashed directly onto the white apron and the front of the black dress. It soaked through, instantly cold and wet against my skin. The stain bloomed across my chest like a gunshot wound. Oops, Tiffany cried out, steadying herself instantly. Mom gasped. She rushed forward, but not to me. She dropped to her knees to inspect the rug. Oh no, did it get on the carpet? Tiffany, honey, are you okay? Did you spill on the rug? I am fine, Mom, Tiffany said, not even looking at the floor. She was looking at me. A smile played on her lips. I just tripped. I am so clumsy today. I stood there, the wine dripping down the front of the dress, pooling at my feet. The sticky liquid was already starting to itch. Mom stood up, relieved that the rug was safe. She looked at me with annoyance. Kamara, look what you made her do. You were standing in her way. Now the uniform is ruined. I made her do it, I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. She threw it on me. Do not be ridiculous, Tiffany said, grabbing a napkin from the coffee table and dabbing at her own pristine white trousers, which did not have a single drop on them. Why would I waste good wine on you? Mom shook her head. Go clean yourself up, Kamara. You smell like a drunk. God, can you not do anything right? We have the party tomorrow, and now we have to try to get that stain out. I looked at Tiffany. She stopped pretending to dab her pants. She lowered the napkin and looked me dead in the eye. Honestly, Kamara, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Do not worry about the stain. It actually makes sense. You are used to being dirty, aren't you? It is kind of your natural state. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mom paused for a second, sensing the cruelty was perhaps a step too far, but she did not correct her. She just turned away and started fluffing the pillows on the sofa. I felt a coldness settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the wine. This was it. This was the final line. There was no going back now. I had given them every chance to be decent. I had given them every opportunity to show a shred of humanity. And they had chosen this. I will go wash it out, I said quietly. I turned to walk toward the kitchen, my wet shoes squeaking on the hardwood floor. As I passed the hallway that led to the bedrooms, I saw movement in the shadows. I stopped. Standing in the doorway of her bedroom was Grandma Hattie. She was leaning on her cane wearing her nightgown. Usually at this hour she would be asleep or pretending to be confused by the television remote. But tonight she was wide awake. She had seen everything. Her eyes, usually warm and crinkled with age, were sharp. They were flint and steel. She looked at the wine-soaked dress. She looked at Tiffany, who was pouring herself another glass. She looked at Mom, who was ignoring me. Then she looked at me. She did not say a word. She did not come out to defend me. She knew that would ruin the plan. Instead, she straightened her spine. She lifted her chin slightly and gave me a single slow nod. It was a nod of permission. It was a nod of solidarity. It was a general giving orders to her soldier. "Burn it down," her eyes said. "Burn it all down." I nodded back, barely visible in the shadows. Then I turned and walked into the kitchen. I took off the ruined apron and threw it in the sink. I stared at my reflection in the window. A woman in a stained maid's dress stared back, but I did not see a victim anymore. I saw an executioner. I pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app that controlled the debt portfolio. I authorized the transfer of ownership for Desmond's car loan. Then I sent a text to the catering company manager. Change of plans. The vintage wine selection for the head table. Cancel it. Replace it with the house red, the cheap stuff, the kind that gives you a headache after one glass, and make sure the label is visible. I smiled. Tiffany liked wine so much she could drink vinegar tomorrow. I grabbed a sponge and started scrubbing the dress. The stain would not come out, but that was fine. I would wear it. I would wear the wine stain like a badge of honor. Let everyone see what they did to me. Let the guests whisper. Because when I took the microphone, the stain on my dress would be nothing compared to the stain on their reputation. Grandma was awake. The wolf was at the door. And the sheep were too busy drinking wine to notice the slaughter was about to begin. The hallway of my parents' house was quiet for the first time in 16 hours. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 2 times, the sound echoing through the darkness. I stood outside the heavy oak door of the guest room on the first floor, the room they had moved Grandma Hattie into because she could no longer manage the stairs, or rather, because Tiffany did not want to carry trays of food up to the second floor. I pushed the door open slowly, wincing as the hinges gave a soft groan. The room smelled of lavender and peppermint, the same scent that had comforted me for 32 years. I expected to find her asleep, her breathing shallow and rhythmic. I expected to have to wake her gently. Instead, the bedside lamp clicked on. Grandma Hattie was sitting up in bed, propped against 3 pillows. She was not wearing her thick glasses and her hearing aids were on the nightstand, yet her eyes were sharp, clear, and completely devoid of the confusion she feigned during the day. "You can stop tiptoeing, baby," she said, her voice strong and steady. "The vultures are asleep. They drank enough wine to knock out a horse." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding and closed the door softly behind me. I walked over to the bed and sat on the edge of the mattress. The mask of the submissive, beaten-down Kamara slipped off my face. My shoulders straightened. The tension in my jaw relaxed. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper-thin, but her grip was iron. "How long?" she asked. "How long are you going to let them play this circus game? I watched that woman throw wine on you today. I watched your mother treat you like a stray dog she regrets feeding. How much more do you need for your little movie?" I squeezed her hand back. "Just a little longer. Until 8 o'clock tomorrow night." She raised a snowy eyebrow. 8 o'clock. "When the candles go out," I said. "When the lights go down for the cake. That is when the show starts." Grandma let out a low, raspy chuckle. She leaned back against the pillows. "You always were the patient one. Desmond was always loud. He wanted everything now. But you were like a spider. You just sat and waited for the fly to stop buzzing." She reached under her pillow and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red wax. "I may be old, Kamara, but I am not blind," she said, tapping the envelope against her chest. "I saw Desmond taking cash from my purse when he thought I was napping. I heard Tiffany on the phone with her friends talking about putting me in a home the second the ink dries on the check. They think because I do not say anything, I do not know anything." She handed the envelope to me. I took it. The paper felt heavy, substantial. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "My lawyer came by last Tuesday," she said, "while Tiffany was at her Botox appointment and your mother was at church. We had a long talk. He was very interested to hear that Desmond claims to be paying for my medical bills, considering I have never seen a dime of his money." I looked at the seal. It was the official seal of the most expensive estate law firm in Atlanta. I drafted a new will, she said simply. And I drafted a power of attorney transfer. She looked me dead in the eye. I know you are not poor, Kamara. My heart skipped a beat. You do? She scoffed. Baby, I saw your shoes when you came in yesterday. You painted the soles black, but I saw the red paint chipping underneath. You are wearing Christian Louboutins to scrub a floor. And that purse you carry, it looks cheap, but the stitching is hand-sewn. You cannot fool me. You have done well for yourself. Tears pricked my eyes. I wanted to tell you, Grandma. I did not want them to know. I did not want them to leech off me. I know, she said softly. And I am proud of you. You built something real. Desmond built a house of cards. And tomorrow, you are going to blow it down. She pointed to the envelope. That document transfers all my assets, the house, the land in Virginia, the stocks my husband left me, into a trust. And guess who the sole trustee is? I smiled. Me, you. And there is a clause in there for Desmond. He gets exactly $1. And Tiffany gets my collection of ceramic cats. She always said she hated them. We both laughed, a quiet conspiratorial sound in the dark room. It was the first time I had laughed genuinely in days. Keep that safe, she said, her eyes growing serious again. Tomorrow, when they ask for a speech, I am going to ask you to read it. I want to see their faces. I want to see the moment they realize the gravy train has derailed. I will keep it safe, I promised. Now go, she said, shooing me away. You have a big day of being a janitor tomorrow. You need your rest. I stood up and kissed her forehead. Good night, Grandma. Good night, CEO, she whispered. I slipped out of the room, the envelope tucked securely under my arm. The hallway was still dark, but I was not afraid of the shadows anymore. I had the ultimate weapon in my hands. Grandma Hattie was not a victim. She was the general. And tomorrow we were going to war. The ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel smelled of white lilies and old money. It was a scent I knew well, but for my family it was an intoxicant. I stood near the service entrance, smoothing the front of my polyester uniform. I had managed to scrub most of the wine stain out, but a faint purple shadow remained on the apron, a permanent reminder of Tiffany's cruelty. I had instructed the florists to use Grandma Hattie's favorite blooms, importing thousands of white hydrangeas and orchids that cascaded from the ceiling like a waterfall. It was breathtaking. It was expensive. And it was all paid for by a shell corporation that listed me as the sole beneficiary. At 4:00 sharp, the double doors swung open. Desmond and Tiffany arrived 2 hours early, just as I knew they would. They did not walk in. They strutted. Desmond was wearing a tuxedo that was a little too shiny, the kind that screams new money, or in his case, no money wrapped in credit card debt. Tiffany was wearing a floor-length gold sequined gown that caught the light and threw it back aggressively. She looked like a trophy. She looked like the mistress of the manor coming to inspect her estate. I stepped back into the shadows of a large fern, watching them. They stopped in the center of the empty dance floor. Desmond spun around, arms wide, looking up at the chandeliers. Unbelievable, Desmond said, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. I cannot believe the bank approved the increase. This place is incredible. He thought the bank had approved his credit line increase. He did not know that the approval was actually a temporary override authorized by my assistant to let him dig his hole just a little bit deeper before the crash. Tiffany walked over to one of the tables, running her hand over the silk tablecloth. She picked up a crystal wine glass and held it up to the light, checking for spots. It is decent, she said, though her eyes were gleaming with greed. It is definitely better than that community center Mom wanted to book. This says Power Desmond. This says we are the heirs. She set the glass down and scanned the room. Her eyes landed on me. The smile dropped from her face instantly. She marched over her heels, clicking sharply on the marble floor. Desmond followed her, adjusting his bow tie. Kamara, Tiffany snapped. What are you doing standing there like a statue? You are ruining the aesthetic. I clasped my hands behind my back. I was just checking the floral arrangements, Tiffany. That is not your job, she hissed. Your job is to be invisible. Look at you. That dress is an eyesore. And is that the stain from yesterday? God, you could not even clean yourself up properly for one night. Desmond stepped forward, looking nervous. He glanced toward the main entrance, as if afraid someone important might walk in and see him talking to the help. You need to move, Kamara, he said. Go to the kitchen. Or the loading dock. Just get out of the main hall. The guests will be arriving soon, and I do not want anyone confusing you for a family member. We have a reputation to uphold. I looked at my brother. He was sweating slightly, despite the air conditioning. The pressure of the lies he was telling was starting to weigh on him. I will go to the back, I said quietly. Good, Tiffany said. And stay there until the speeches are over. We do not need you lurking in the background of our photos. This night is about celebrating Grandma, and more importantly, celebrating the future of this family. A future that, quite frankly, does not include people who cannot pay their own rent. I turned and walked toward the swinging kitchen doors. But I did not go all the way in. I stopped at the small circular window peering out. I watched as Tiffany pulled a ring light out of her designer clutch. She set up her phone on a tripod she had forced Desmond to carry. She fluffed her hair, she checked her teeth. Then she hit record. Her face transformed. The sneer was replaced by a radiant, benevolent smile. She waved at the camera. Hey everyone, it is Tiffany Miller here, live from the St. Regis. I just wanted to give you guys a sneak peek of the setup for Grandma Hattie's 85th birthday. It has been so much work, you guys have no idea. Desmond and I have been planning this for months, sparing no expense because family means everything to us. She spun the camera around to show the ballroom, making sure to keep me and the service doors out of the frame. Look at these flowers. I personally chose every single stem. It is exhausting being the one who holds everything together, but seeing Grandma happy will be worth it. We are hoping tonight is going to be a very special night. There are rumors that Grandma is finally going to announce the future of the Miller estate, and we are just praying she makes the choice that ensures the legacy continues with responsible hands. Responsible hands. I almost laughed out loud. Her hands were currently gripping a phone she hadn't paid the bill for in 2 months. Desmond walked into the frame, putting his arm around her waist. He flashed a salesman smile. That is right, baby. We do it for love. And speaking of love, big shout out to everyone supporting my run for regional manager. Success is a mindset, people. I watched them preen. I watched them lie. They were so confident. They were so sure that they were the protagonists of this story. They thought the world was their audience, and I was just a prop. I stepped away from the window and leaned against the cold stainless steel counter of the service station. A large man in a black suit with an earpiece walked by. He was the head of security for the venue. But tonight, he was reporting to me. He stopped when he saw me. He did not look at my stained dress. He did not look at my cheap shoes. He looked me in the eye and touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a salute. Ms. Kamara, he said, his voice low and respectful. All units are in position. We have secured the exits. The private server containing the digital evidence is linked to the main projector. We are ready on your command. I reached up and adjusted the tiny invisible earpiece hidden beneath my hair. Thank you, Marcus, I said. Hold the feed. Let them have their cocktail hour. Let them drink the champagne. Let them feel like kings and queens. Copy that, he said. And the special guests, Senator Hayes and Mr. Thorne, are in the changing room now, I said. They are putting on their waiter uniforms. Make sure nobody harasses them until the reveal. Understood. He walked away, disappearing into the bustle of the kitchen staff. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I pulled out my phone and opened the live stream Tiffany was currently broadcasting. I saw the comments rolling in. User 1 wrote, "Wow, Tiffany, you are such an angel. The place looks amazing." User 2 wrote, "Power couple goals." User 3 wrote, "Hope. You get that inheritance, girl." I typed a comment from an anonymous account I had created years ago. Enjoy the party. The truth comes out when the candles are blown out. I watched Tiffany on the screen. She saw the comment. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She frowned, looking around the room, her eyes darting toward the shadows. She sensed something. A shift in the air. A vibration in the floorboards. But then Desmond whispered something in her ear, probably about how good she looked, and she laughed, dismissing the feeling. She went back to posing, back to bragging, back to digging her own grave. I put the phone away. I adjusted my apron. I picked up a tray of empty champagne flutes. It was time to go to work. I pushed open the kitchen doors and stepped out into the ballroom. I walked right past them, head bowed, eyes lowered. Tiffany snapped her fingers at me as I passed. "Hey you," she called out, not even using my name. "Grab that napkin off the floor. It looks messy." I stopped. I bent down. I picked up the napkin. "Right away, ma'am," I whispered. I walked away, clutching the napkin. I could feel their eyes on my back, judging me, dismissing me. They had no idea that the woman cleaning their floor was the same woman who owned the ground they were standing on. The guests were starting to arrive. The trap was set. And as the first notes of the jazz band began to play, I smiled. It was showtime. The double doors of the ballroom swung open at 6 o'clock sharp, admitting a steady stream of Atlanta's elite. The air instantly filled with the murmur of expensive conversation, the rustle of silk gowns, and the clinking of crystal flutes. I stood in the shadow of a large marble pillar near the kitchen entrance, holding a silver tray of empty napkins. My posture was slumped, my eyes lowered, playing the part of the invisible servant to perfection. But beneath my lashes, my eyes were darting around the room, cataloging every arrival. To my left, the CEO of Delta Airlines was shaking hands with a tech mogul from Silicon Valley. To my right, the mayor of Atlanta was laughing at a joke made by a famous hip-hop producer. These were people who did not attend birthday parties for random grandmothers in the suburbs. These were people who moved markets and shaped laws. They were here because 2 weeks ago I had sent out personal invitations from my private email address, the one that ended in Velvet Ink Global. I had told them that my grandmother was a woman of history and that her 85th birthday was a networking event they could not afford to miss. But Desmond and Tiffany did not know that. They stood at the entrance of the ballroom, greeting guests with wide, bewildered smiles. They looked like deer caught in the headlights of a very expensive car. I watched Desmond shake the hand of a man he had only ever seen on CNN. "Welcome," Desmond said, pumping the man's hand enthusiastically. "I am Desmond Miller. I am the grandson. Thank you for coming to support the family." The man looked at Desmond with polite confusion, clearly having no idea who he was, but he smiled and nodded before moving toward the open bar. Tiffany leaned into Desmond, whispering loudly enough for me to hear from 10 feet away. "Desmond, oh my God, is that Senator Hayes' chief of staff? How did he get an invite? Did your boss send it?" Desmond puffed out his chest, adjusting his bow tie. "I told you, Tiff, my name carries weight in this town. People know I am next in line for the regional manager spot. Success attracts success." I almost snorted. Success attracts success. Desmond could not attract a fly to honey. Just then, Julian Hayes walked past me. The state senator was wearing a white waiter's jacket that was a little tight across his shoulders and a black bow tie. He was carrying a tray of crab cakes. He stopped next to me, keeping his face forward. "Your brother just tried to network with the valet parking attendant," Julian whispered out of the corner of his mouth. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "Keep walking, Julian. Do not break character." He winked at me and merged into the crowd, offering appetizers to the very people who had donated millions to his campaign last year. I checked my watch. 7:30. 30 minutes until the cake cutting. 30 minutes until the lights went out. 30 minutes until the end of the world as the Millers knew it. I watched Desmond navigate the room. He was drunk on the atmosphere. He was grabbing people by the arm, laughing too loudly at jokes he did not understand, and acting like the lord of the manor. He spotted a waiter standing near the VIP table. It was Julian again. Desmond marched over to him. I tensed. This was the moment. "Hey, you?" Desmond snapped, snapping his fingers in Julian's face. Julian turned slowly. "Yes, sir." "My glass is empty," Desmond said, holding out his champagne flute. "And the mayor's water glass is low. Can you not see that? What are we paying you for? To stand around and look pretty." Julian looked at the glass. Then he looked at Desmond. For a split second, I saw the senator flash in his eyes the man who could shred an opponent in a debate with a single sentence. But then the mask slid back into place. "My apologies, sir," Julian said smoothly. "I will fetch a fresh bottle immediately." "And make it snappy," Desmond grunted. "And get me some of those shrimp things. I am starving." Desmond turned back to the mayor, who was watching the interaction with a raised eyebrow. "Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Good help is so hard to find these days. You have to stay on top of them or they get lazy." I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. Desmond Miller, a man with a credit score of 420, had just snapped his fingers at the man who controlled the state budget. He had just ordered a senator to fetch him shrimp. The sheer, unadulterated hubris was breathtaking. I looked across the room. Tiffany was holding court near the chocolate fountain. She had cornered the wife of a real estate tycoon and was aggressively showing her pictures of her kids on her phone. The woman looked desperate to escape. "And this is Braden," Tiffany was saying. "He is a genius. We are looking into private schools, but honestly, it is so hard to find an institution that meets our standards." Tiffany waved at a passing waiter. "It was Marcus Thorne, the billionaire CEO. "Waiter," Tiffany called out. Marcus stopped. "Take this plate," she said, thrusting a dirty napkin and a half-eaten strawberry tart at him. "It is cluttering up the table." Marcus took the plate with a gloved hand. "Certainly, ma'am. And bring me a napkin for my hands," she added. "This chocolate is sticky." Marcus bowed slightly. "Right away." He walked past me on his way to the kitchen, a grin plastered on his face. "She just tipped me $1, Marcus whispered as he passed. "I think I'm going to frame it." I shook my head. They were digging their graves with golden shovels. Suddenly the room went quiet. The double doors opened again. Grandma Hattie had arrived. She was sitting in her wheelchair not because she could not walk, but because she wanted the entrance. She was wearing a deep purple gown with a high collar looking like royalty. A diamond brooch, real diamonds, a gift from me 3 years ago, that she claimed was costume jewelry, glittered on her chest. Desmond and Tiffany rushed over to her, flanking the wheelchair like bodyguards. They wanted to be the ones seen pushing her. They wanted the photo op. Grandma Desmond boomed. "Look at this! Look at what we did for you!" Tiffany leaned down, putting a hand on Grandma's shoulder. "We did it all for you, Hattie. We wanted you to feel like a queen." Grandma Hattie looked around the room. She saw the flowers. She saw the guests. She saw the extravagance. Then her eyes found mine in the shadows. She gave a microscopic nod. "It is very expensive," Grandma said, her voice dry. "Only the best for you," Desmond said, puffing out his chest. I spared no expense. I stepped forward just slightly enough to catch the light. Tiffany saw me and shot me a glare that could peel paint. She made a shooing motion with her hand, telling me to get back. I retreated into the darkness. The band struck up a lively jazz number. The guests mingled. The laughter grew louder. Desmond and Tiffany were floating on a cloud of narcissism, completely unaware that the storm was gathering directly above their heads. I pulled out my phone. I sent a single message to the audio-visual technician in the booth. "Get the file ready." Code red. Then I sent a message to the team of process servers waiting in the lobby. "Stand by. Target is in the center of the dance floor." I looked at Desmond one last time. He was laughing, his head thrown back, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked happy. He looked triumphant. "Enjoy it, brother," I thought. "Drink it up, because in 20 minutes that champagne is going to turn into vinegar in your mouth." I put my phone away and picked up a pitcher of water. I walked out onto the floor, moving toward the head table. I was just the help. I was just the charity case. I was just camera. But as I poured water into the crystal glasses moving silently around the family that had tormented me for a decade, I felt a surge of power so intense it almost made me dizzy. They thought this was a party. They were wrong. This was an execution, and I was the one holding the axe. The jazz band trailed off into silence as the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A single blinding spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the center stage where a microphone stand waited. Desmond adjusted his bow tie one last time, checked his reflection in a silver serving platter, and stepped into the light. He walked with a swagger that suggested he had personally built the St. Regis Hotel with his own hands, rather than just maxed out a credit card to rent a room in it for 4 hours. Testing, 1, 2, Desmond said into the microphone. His voice boomed through the high-tech sound system I had paid for. He smiled, loving the sound of his own amplified authority. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, I am Desmond Miller. And tonight, we are here to celebrate the matriarch of our family, Hattie Miller. A polite ripple of applause went through the room. Desmond soaked it up, closing his eyes for a second, as if he were a rock star on a world tour. He opened his eyes and leaned against the podium. You know, growing up, Grandma taught me a lot about value. She taught me that true wealth isn't just about the cars you drive or the suits you wear, although looking around this room, I think we can all agree the Millers have done pretty well in that department. He chuckled at his own joke. Nobody else laughed. The CEO of Delta Airlines took a sip of water, looking bored. Julian Hayes, standing near the back in his waiter uniform, rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. But seriously, Desmond continued, his voice taking on a fake, somber tone. Family is about lifting each other up. It is about the strong carrying the weak. And that brings me to a special announcement. He paused for dramatic effect. As many of you know, I wanted to give Grandma the world. So my wife Tiffany and I have decided to send Grandma Hattie on an all-expenses-paid luxury tour of Europe. Paris, Rome, London. First class all the way. He threw his arms out, expecting thunderous applause. There was a silence. A thick, heavy silence. A few people clapped politely, but mostly the guests were exchanging confused glances. They knew who I was. They knew I was the one with the international connections. The idea of Desmond, a man whose suit didn't quite fit right, sending anyone to Europe seemed improbable to them. Desmond faltered for a microsecond, sweat shining on his forehead. But he pushed through. He needed a prop. He needed something to make himself look like a savior. He scanned the room until his eyes locked on me. I was standing by the kitchen doors holding a pitcher of water. And speaking of family supporting family, Desmond said, his voice dripping with condescension, I want to bring my little sister Kamara up here. Come on up, Kamara. Do not be shy. My stomach turned. This was not part of the schedule. He was improvising. He wanted to use me as a footstool to make himself look taller. I stayed frozen. Come on, Desmond urged, waving his hand. Everyone give her a round of applause. Let's encourage her. The spotlight swung wildly, searching the room until it landed on me. The bright beam blinded me for a second. I was illuminated in my stained, ill-fitting maid's uniform, clutching a water pitcher like a lifeline. Go, Tiffany hissed from the side of the stage. She waved frantically. Get up there. He is trying to include you. Do not embarrass us. I walked slowly toward the stage. My cheap rubber-soled shoes squeaked on the polished floor. Every eye in the room was on me. But unlike Desmond, I did not feel fear. I felt the gaze of my friends. I saw Marcus Thorne lower his tray, his jaw set in anger. I saw Julian take a step forward, ready to intervene. I gave them a tiny, imperceptible shake of my head. Not yet. I climbed the stairs to the stage. Desmond wrapped a heavy, sweaty arm around my shoulders. He pulled me close, too close. The smell of his cheap cologne was overpowering. Look at her, Desmond said to the crowd, squeezing my shoulder. My baby sister. You know, folks, life hasn't been easy for Kamara. We all have different paths. I went into business, I climbed the ladder. I built a life of success. And Kamara, well, Kamara has had a hard time finding her footing. He looked down at me with a pity that was designed to humiliate. After her husband left her, and after the financial struggles, most families might have turned their backs. But not the Millers. We believe in charity starting at home. That is why we let Kamara help out tonight. That is why we give her a purpose. Even if that purpose is just cleaning up after the party, it is honest work, right? He laughed. He actually laughed. And look at this dress, he said, fingering the polyester fabric of my sleeve. She might not be wearing Chanel like my beautiful wife Tiffany, but she is here. She is trying. And that is what matters. We are just happy we can provide a safety net for her so she does not end up on the street. He looked out at the audience, beaming, waiting for the adoration. He expected them to ooh and ah at his benevolence. He expected them to see him as a saint for taking care of the broken, pathetic sister. But the room was dead silent. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a predator watching prey. The guests, my business partners, my political allies, were staring at Desmond with a mixture of horror and disgust. They saw a man in a cheap tuxedo mocking a woman they knew to be a genius. They saw a bully. Desmond's smile started to twitch. He couldn't understand why nobody was clapping. "Tough crowd," he muttered into the mic, trying to save the moment. Tiffany, sensing the awkwardness, strutted onto the stage. She looked radiant in her gold dress, the picture of the supportive wife. She came up to my other side and looped her arm through mine. "What Desmond means," Tiffany chirped into the mic, her voice high and shrill, "is that we love Kamara, flaws and all. We are just so blessed to be in a position to help the less fortunate, even when they are related to us." She squeezed my arm. Her fingernails dug into my bicep, sharp and painful. "Smile," she whispered through her teeth, her voice low enough that the microphone didn't pick it up. "Smile, Kamara. You look like a funeral. People are watching. Look grateful." I turned my head slowly to look at her. Her eyes were hard, manic. She was terrified that the image was cracking. I forced the corners of my mouth up. It wasn't a smile. It was a baring of teeth. "That is better," she whispered. "Just stand there and look pathetic. It makes us look better." Desmond regained his confidence with Tiffany by his side. "So let's raise a glass," he shouted. "To Grandma Hattie, and to the Miller legacy. May it always be strong, wealthy, and generous." He raised his glass. Tiffany raised hers. They looked at me, expecting me to clap. I stood there, the water pitcher still in my hand. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Grandma Hattie in the front row. She was not looking at Desmond. She was looking at me. Her hands were folded in her lap, resting on the manila envelope I had given back to her earlier. She nodded. One single sharp nod. It was time. I stepped away from Desmond's sweaty grip. I pulled my arm out of Tiffany's claws. "Kamara." "What are you doing?" Desmond hissed. "Get back in line." I walked to the podium. Desmond tried to block me, but I moved with a speed and authority he had never seen before. I grabbed the microphone stand and adjusted it. I tapped the mic. Boom. Boom. The sound echoed like thunder. Desmond laughed nervously. "Oh, looks like the help wants to say a few words." "Go ahead, Kamara. Make it quick, we have cake cutting in 5 minutes." I looked at him. My eyes were cold. My posture was straight. The slump was gone. The submissive sister was gone. "You are right, Desmond," I said, my voice calm, steady, and commanding. "It is time to talk about the Miller legacy, and it is time to talk about charity." I turned to the audio booth in the back of the room. "Cut the music," I said, "and put the feed on the main screen." Tiffany frowned. "What feed? What is she talking about?" Suddenly, the massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying a slideshow of stock photos of Paris, flickered. It went black for a second. Then it lit up. It wasn't a photo. It was a screenshot. A screenshot of a text message thread dated 9 years ago. The header read, "The Real Millers, No Kamara Allowed." Desmond's face went pale. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "You wanted to talk about family, Desmond," I asked, my voice ringing through the silent hall. "So let's talk. Let's read some receipts." I looked at the audience. "Can everyone read the text on the screen?" I asked. "Or should I ask my brother to read his own words out loud?" The room gasped. And for the first time all night, Desmond Miller was absolutely speechless. The feedback from this microphone was a sharp, high-pitched whine that cut through the silence, but nobody covered their ears. They were too paralyzed by what was happening. I stood at the podium gripping the cold metal stand with hands that were steady and dry. My brother Desmond stood a few feet away, his mouth opening and closing like a fish that had been thrown onto a dock. He looked at the black screen behind me, then at me, then at the audience. Panic was beginning to set in, the kind of primal fear that happens when a predator realizes it has become the prey. "You are right, Desmond," I said, my voice amplified and crystal clear, reaching every corner of the ballroom. "You just gave a beautiful speech about family. You said family is about sharing. You said family is about honesty, and I agree with you completely." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I looked directly at Tiffany. She was standing frozen near the edge of the stage, her knuckles white as she gripped her clutch. She knew. Deep down in the darkest part of her soul, she knew exactly what was coming. So I continued, my voice dropping an octave, becoming darker, more dangerous. "Since we are sharing everything tonight, I think it is only fair that we share the truth. You mentioned that I am the charity case. You mentioned that I am the failure. But I think the guests deserve to know what the real Millers actually think about Grandma Hattie." I turned my head slightly toward the audiovisual booth in the back. "Hit it," I commanded. The massive LED screen behind me, which cost $5,000 to rent for the evening, flickered to life. It did not show the slideshow of stock photos of Paris that Desmond had downloaded from the internet. It did not show the flattering portraits of Tiffany that she had spent hours editing. It showed a screenshot. A massive high-definition screenshot of a WhatsApp group chat. The green header was visible to everyone in the room, even the people standing in the back by the bar. It read, "The Real Millers," and underneath, in smaller text, "No Kamara Allowed." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I saw the mayor of Atlanta squinting at the screen. I saw the CEO of Delta Airlines put on his glasses. "Let's take a look at a conversation from 3 months ago," I said, acting as the narrator of their destruction. This was dated October 12th, the day Grandma Hattie was hospitalized for pneumonia. I pointed to the first message bubble on the screen. It was from Tiffany. Her profile picture was a selfie of her pouting. I read the text out loud, my voice devoid of emotion. Tiffany wrote, "Ugh, the doctor says she is going to pull through. I cannot believe it. I already picked out the new curtains for the master bedroom. Why is this old hag so hard to kill? I need that house before the market dips." The gasp that went through the room sucked the oxygen out of the air. It was a physical sound, a collective recoil of disgust. Tiffany let out a strangled cry. "That is fake. That is not real. She hacked my phone. She is using a—" I ignored her. I clicked a small remote in my hand. The screen scrolled down. "And here is a response from her loving husband, Desmond," I said. The message on the screen was from Desmond. Desmond wrote, "Don't worry, babe. She is 85. She cannot last much longer. Once she kicks the bucket, we sell the house, dump the ceramic cats, and buy that boat. And do not worry about Kamara. That idiot thinks she is getting a share, but I convinced Mom to cut her out of the will completely. She will be on the street, and we will be in the Hamptons." I looked at Desmond. He was pale, a sickly shade of gray that matched the napkins I had held earlier. He was shaking his head, backing away from me as if I were radioactive. "No," he whispered. "No, that was private. You cannot show that. That is illegal." I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. Illegal Desmond. You signed a family non-disclosure agreement yesterday, remember? But the funny thing about that agreement is that you never actually countersigned it. I have the copy. It only has my signature, which means I am not bound by anything. But you are bound by the truth. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time it was a spreadsheet, a betting pool. And for those who think this is just about money, let's look at how much they respect my personal life, I said. Here is a betting pool organized by Tiffany titled Kamara's Inevitable Divorce. The screen showed a list of dates and dollar amounts. Mom bet $50 that my husband would leave me within 6 months, I read. Desmond bet $100 that he would leave me because I was, quote, too depressing to look at. And Tiffany put down $200 that I would end up living in my car. I looked out at the audience. I saw Julian Hayes, the state senator, standing near the front now. He had taken off his waiter's jacket. He was wearing his tuxedo shirt underneath. He looked furious. He looked ready to fight. I saw Grandma Hattie. She was crying. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. She was nodding her head, watching the screen, watching the truth finally come into the light. Tiffany screamed. It was a primal, animalistic shriek. "Turn it off!" she yelled, her face contorted into a mask of pure rage. She abandoned all pretense of elegance. She hiked up her gold-sequined dress and lunged toward the stage. She looked like a demon. Her eyes were wild. She was not looking at the screen anymore. She was looking at me. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to silence me. She scrambled up the stairs, her heels clicking frantically. "Give me that microphone, you bitch! You jealous, lying bitch!" She reached out her claw like nails, aiming for my face. I did not flinch. I did not move. I did not even blink, because I knew who was standing in the shadows. Just as Tiffany lunged for me, a massive figure stepped out from behind the curtain. It was the head of security, the man I had spoken to earlier. He moved with the speed of a linebacker. He stepped in front of me, creating a wall of muscle between me and my sister-in-law. He caught Tiffany by the wrists mid-air. "That is enough, ma'am," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Let me go!" Tiffany screeched, thrashing against his grip. She kicked at him, her gold shoes making contact with his shin, but he didn't budge. She tried to bite him. She was foaming at the mouth, completely unhinged. Desmond rushed forward, trying to save his wife, trying to save face. "Hey! Get your hands off her! Do you know who I am? I am the host of this party." The security guard looked at Desmond. He did not release Tiffany. Instead, he looked at me. "Ms. Kamara," the guard asked, "what are your orders?" The room went silent again. Everyone heard it. He did not ask Desmond. He did not ask Tiffany. He asked the woman in the maid's uniform. Desmond froze. "Why are you asking her?" "She is the help." I stepped out from behind the guard. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at Desmond, who was sweating through his cheap tuxedo. I looked at Tiffany, who was panting, her hair wild, her makeup smeared. I leaned into the microphone one last time. "Actually, Desmond," I said, "I am not the help. I am the host. I paid for this venue. I paid for the flowers. I paid for the champagne you have been drinking. And I paid for the security guard who is currently holding your wife." I clicked the remote one last time. The screen changed from the text messages to a bank statement. It showed a wire transfer of $50,000 to the St. Regis Hotel. The sender name was clearly visible: Velvet Inc. Global Holdings. CEO Kamara Miller. The crowd gasped again. This time it was not disgust, it was awe. Desmond stared at the screen. His mouth fell open. "Velvet Inc., he whispered. That is the company that handles crisis management for the NFL. That is a multi-million-dollar firm." I smiled. "And that is my company, Desmond. I am not a charity case. I am a tycoon. And you are just a man who forgot to pay his mortgage." I turned to the guard. "Escort them out," I said calmly. "They are trespassing on my property." Tiffany began to scream again, a long, wailing sound of defeat, as the guard began to drag her toward the exit. Desmond stumbled backward, looking at the guests, looking for an ally, but finding only a sea of cold, judgmental faces. The receipts had been read, the bill was due, and the Millers were officially bankrupt in every way that mattered. Desmond looked like a man watching his life burn down in high definition. The LED screen behind me was still glowing with the evidence of his cruelty, casting a harsh blue light over his sweating face. He stared at the bank transfer receipt I had just displayed, the one that proved I owned the venue, the food, and the very ground he was standing on. His brain was struggling to process the information. It was a glitch in his reality. In his world, I was the failure and he was the success. The data on the screen contradicted the only narrative he had ever known. "Turn it off!" Desmond screamed, his voice cracked high and hysterical. He pointed a shaking finger at the audio booth in the back of the room. "I said turn it off right now. You are fired. Everyone is fired. This is my party. This is my night." He turned back to me, his eyes bulging. "And you? You think this is funny? You think you can just hack into the system and embarrass me? You are sick, Kamara. You are mentally unstable. That is why your husband left you." The crowd gasped. It was a low blow, desperate and pathetic. But I did not flinch. I did not even blink. I just watched him unravel. "Security!" Desmond yelled, looking around wildly. "Where is security? Get this woman off the stage. She is ruining my grandmother's birthday. She is trespassing." The head of security, the man who was currently holding Tiffany back from attacking me, did not move. He just looked at Desmond with a bored expression. Desmond's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. "Are you deaf?" I said. "Throw her out. I am the host. I am the one paying the bills here." Suddenly a voice cut through the chaos. It was calm baritone and commanded instant authority. "Actually, Mr. Miller, that is factually incorrect." Desmond whipped his head around. Standing just a few feet away was the waiter he had snapped his fingers at earlier, the waiter he had ordered to fetch shrimp, the waiter he had treated like furniture. Julian Hayes stepped forward. He reached up and untied the black bow tie around his neck, letting it hang loose against his white shirt. He unbuttoned the waiter's jacket and shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor to reveal a tailored tuxedo shirt and suspenders underneath. "Who asked you?" Desmond spat. "Go get me a drink or get out of my face. I do not have time for the help right now." Julian smiled. It was a shark's smile. He walked up the stairs of the stage, moving with the easy confidence of a man who owned rooms far bigger than this one. He stood next to me, placing a protective hand on the podium. "I believe you are confused," Desmond Julian said. His voice projected without a microphone trained in the halls of the state senate. "I am not the help, and this is not your party." Desmond blinked. "I know you. I saw you. Somewhere." From the back of the room, the mayor of Atlanta stood up. He had been watching the scene with rapt attention. "Senator Hayes," the mayor called out. "Is that you?" The room erupted in whispers. "Senator." That waiter was the senator. Julian nodded to the mayor. "Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My apologies for the deception. I was doing a favor for a friend." Julian turned his cold gaze back to Desmond. Desmond looked like he was about to vomit. He looked from Julian to me, trying to connect the dots. You are Senator Hayes," Desmond stammered. "But you were serving crab cakes." "I saw you." "I was," Julian said smoothly. "Because when Kamara Miller asks for a favor, you do it. You see, Mr. Miller Kamara is not just my friend, she is my chief strategic advisor. She is the reason I won my seat by a landslide. She runs the crisis management firm that saved my campaign 3 years ago." Desmond's jaw dropped. "Strategic advisor. Her. She writes blogs. She is broke." Julian laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. "Broke, Mr. Miller? The woman standing next to you has a net worth that makes your entire existence look like a rounding error. She paid for this party. She paid for the catering. She paid for the security. She even paid for the champagne you have been guzzling all night." The only thing you contributed to this evening was your audacity. Desmond took a step back as if Julian had physically slapped him. He looked at the crowd. He saw the realization dawning on their faces. The guests were looking at me with new eyes. They weren't seeing the maid anymore. They were seeing the power broker. They were seeing the woman who could command senators to wear aprons. "This is a lie," Desmond whispered, but the fight was draining out of him. "It is a prank. It has to be." Julian leaned in close to Desmond, but he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "It is time for you to leave the stage, son. You are out of your depth. You are drowning in a pool you are not qualified to swim in. Step down before you drown completely." Desmond looked at Tiffany. He needed her to fix this. He needed her to scream, to lie, to do something. But Tiffany was not screaming anymore. She was staring at me. Her face had gone from red to a terrifying shade of ash gray. Her eyes were locked on the bank statement, still displayed on the screen. She was doing the math. She was calculating every insult she had thrown at me over the last 9 years. She was remembering every time she made me sleep on the couch, every time she made me wash her dishes, every time she called me a charity case. And she realized that the charity case held the mortgage to her house. Tiffany's lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked at her husband, the man she had bet on, the man she thought was her ticket to the high life. And she saw him for what he was: a fraud, a failure, a clown in a rented suit. Then there was a thud. Everyone turned. Everyone. My mother Loretta had collapsed near the front row. She did not fall hard. It was a graceful, controlled descent. She crumpled onto the thick carpet like a wilting flower, one hand fluttering to her forehead. Mom Desmond yelled, seeing his chance to escape the humiliation. He rushed off the stage and knelt beside her. "Someone call 911. My mother has fainted. She is having a heart attack." The room fell into a hush. People started to move forward, concerned. I stood on the stage and watched. I knew my mother. I knew her theatrics. She used to faint when my father found receipts for expensive shoes she tried to hide. She used to faint when I got better grades than Desmond. This was her escape hatch. She could not face the truth, so she decided to turn the lights out. "Let her breathe," I said into the microphone. My voice was cool, cutting through the panic. "Do not crowd her." Desmond looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "You did this. You killed her. Are you happy now?" I walked down the stairs of the stage. I walked slowly, my heels clicking on the wood. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked until I was standing right over my mother and brother. Julian followed me, standing like a sentinel at my back. Marcus Thorne, who had also abandoned his waiter persona, joined us, crossing his massive arms. I looked down at Loretta. Her eyelids were fluttering slightly. Her breathing was even. Her color was fine. "She is not dead, Desmond," I said. "She is embarrassed. There is a difference." I crouched down. I leaned close to my mother's ear. "You can stop acting, Mom," I whispered. "The performance is over. And just so you know, the ambulance ride is not covered by my insurance. You will have to pay for that yourself. Or maybe Desmond can put it on his frozen credit card." Loretta's eyes snapped open. She glared at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. She sat up instantly, the fainting spell miraculously cured by the mention of money. "You ungrateful child," she hissed. "How could you do this to us?" In front of everyone, I stood up and smoothed my stained apron. "I did not do anything, Mom. I just turned on a screen. You guys did the rest. You wrote the texts. You told the lies. I just provided the lighting." I turned to the security guards. "Get them out," I said. "All of them. Desmond, Tiffany, and Loretta. Remove them from the premises immediately." "But this is Grandma's party," Desmond shouted, clinging to his mother. "You cannot kick us out of Grandma's party." I looked at Grandma Hattie. She was sitting in her wheelchair watching the scene with a small, satisfied smile. She held the manila envelope in her lap. Grandma, I asked, do you want them here? The room waited. The matriarch looked at her son. She looked at her daughter-in-law. She looked at the grandson she had pampered for 35 years. She picked up the microphone I had left on the table next to her. Get out, Hattie said. Her voice was weak, but clear. Take your fake tears and your fake money and get out of my sight. I want to eat my cake with my granddaughter, my real granddaughter. Desmond looked like he had been shot. Tiffany let out a sob and covered her face. Loretta scrambled to her feet, trying to maintain some dignity, but her knees were shaking. The security guards moved in. They were not gentle this time. They grabbed Desmond by the arms. They guided Tiffany and Loretta toward the side exit. As they were dragged away, kicking and screaming about lawsuits and unfairness, the guests watched in silence. Nobody defended them. Nobody offered a hand. The curtain had been pulled back, and the wizard was just a small, sad man with no power. I watched them disappear through the double doors. The silence in the room stretched out for a moment longer. Then slowly, Julian began to clap. Then Marcus. Then the mayor. Then the CEO of Delta. The applause swelled. It grew louder and louder until it filled the cavernous room. They were not clapping for the drama. They were clapping for the justice. They were clapping for the woman who had stood in the fire and refused to burn. I looked at Grandma Hattie. She winked at me. I walked over to her and took the microphone. Sorry about the interruption, everyone. I said, a genuine smile finally breaking across my face. Now who wants cake? It is paid for. And I promise it tastes a lot better than revenge. The security guards stopped dragging my family toward the exit for a brief moment. The room was suspended in a state of absolute shock. My mother was clutching her pearls. Desmond was hyperventilating, and Tiffany looked like a statue of misery. But the person who commanded the attention of every soul in that ballroom was not me. It was Grandma Hattie. She did not look frail anymore. The woman who had spent the last decade hunched over in a wheelchair, pretending to be hard of hearing and confused, sat up straight. Her spine was steel. Her eyes, usually clouded with feigned age, were clear and sharp as diamonds. She raised a hand, her fingers steady, and beckoned to me. Kamara, she said. Her voice was not the whisper everyone was used to. It was strong. It was the voice of the woman who had built this family from nothing. Help me up, Desmond gasped. Grandma, you cannot stand. You have bad knees. Grandma Hattie ignored him. I walked over to her. I offered her my arm. She gripped it, her fingers digging into my skin with surprising strength. With one smooth motion, she pulled herself out of the wheelchair. She stood tall, smoothing down the front of her purple silk gown. She did not need her cane. She did not need help. She walked to the microphone stand I had vacated. She looked out at the crowd. Then she looked at the security guards holding her son and his wife. Let them go, Grandma Hattie ordered. I want them to hear this. The guards stepped back. Desmond, Tiffany, and Loretta huddled together, looking like terrified children caught stealing from the cookie jar. Grandma Hattie gripped the microphone. For 9 years she began, her voice echoing off the walls. I have played the part of the foolish old woman. I sat in that corner chair. I let you feed me mush. I let you talk about me as if I was already a corpse. I let you think I was blind. She turned her head slowly to look at Desmond. But I was not blind, Desmond. I was watching. I watched you steal cash from my purse while I pretended to sleep. I watched you sign my name on checks I never authorized. I watched you treat your sister like a dog because you were too insecure to admit she was smarter than you. Desmond sobbed. Grandma, please. I did it for us. Silence, she commanded. The word cracked like a whip. She turned her gaze to Tiffany. Tiffany shrank back, trying to hide behind Desmond. And you? Hattie said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Tiffany, the woman who thinks she is too good for this family. I saw the text messages on that screen. You asked why the old hag is so hard to kill. Is that right? Tiffany shook her head frantically. No, Grandma. I never meant— You meant every word. Hattie cut her off. You want me dead so you can sell my house. You want me dead so you can buy a boat. You have been counting the days until my funeral like it is a holiday. Grandma Hattie reached into the bodice of her dress. She pulled out a folded document. It was thick. It was old. The paper was yellowed at the edges. Everyone in the room recognized it. It was the last will and testament that had been sitting in the safe for a decade, the one that gave everything to Desmond. You want this? Hattie asked, holding the paper up. This is what you have been waiting for. This is the paper that says Desmond gets the house, the stocks, and the land. This is the paper that says Kamara gets nothing because she is the charity case. Desmond's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. Grandma, yes. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. Hattie laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You are right, Desmond. Blood is thicker, but loyalty is everything. And for 9 years I have been blind to the fact that the only person in this room who actually loves me is the one you tried to destroy. She looked at me. Her eyes softened. Kamara did not know I had money. She did not know about the trust. She thought I was just a poor old woman. And yet she visited me every Sunday. She washed my hair. She read to me. And tonight she spent her own fortune to give me a night I would remember. She did not do it for an inheritance. She did it because she is a good woman. Hattie looked back at the trio of vultures. And thanks to my granddaughter, my eyes are finally wide open. With a sudden violent motion, Grandma Hattie ripped the document in half. The sound of the thick paper tearing was louder than a gunshot in the silent room. Desmond screamed as if she had ripped his own skin. She put the two halves together and ripped them again, and again. She tore the legacy they felt entitled to into confetti. She threw the pieces into the air. They fluttered down to the stage floor like snow. That will is gone, Hattie declared, and so is your place in my life. She turned to me. Read the new one, Kamara, she said. Read it so they know exactly what the price of betrayal is. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a bomb blast, a vacuum of sound, where the only thing you can hear is the ringing in your ears. Grandma Hattie sat in her wheelchair, looking like a queen on her throne, the shreds of the old will scattered around her feet like confetti. Desmond and Tiffany stood frozen, their eyes locked on the paper debris. The inheritance they had banked on the safety net that had allowed them to live recklessly beyond their means for a decade was gone. But I was not done. The destruction of their future was satisfying, but I needed to address their present. I needed to address the debt they had racked up while mocking me for counting coupons. I raised my hand, snapping my fingers once. From the shadows of the stage wing, a man stepped forward. He was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Desmond's car. He carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy with the weight of bad news. This was David Sterling, the most ruthless corporate attorney in Atlanta, and my personal legal counsel. Who is that? Desmond whispered, his voice trembling. David walked to the microphone. He did not smile. He placed the briefcase on the podium and clicked the latches open. The sound echoed through the room like 2 gunshots. Good evening, David said. His voice was smooth, calm, and utterly terrifying. I am David Sterling, legal representative for Ms. Kamara Miller and the newly appointed administrator of the Hattie Miller estate. Tiffany gasped. Administrator, but... Desmond is the executor. It says so in the will. David pulled a document from his briefcase. He held it up. That will has been revoked, Mrs. Miller. As of 3 days ago, Mrs. Hattie Miller underwent a full competency evaluation by a court-appointed psychiatrist. She was found to be of sound mind and exceptional mental clarity. Following that evaluation, she executed a new estate plan. He placed the document down and looked directly at Desmond. All assets previously held by Mrs. Hattie Miller, including the primary residence on Oak Creek Drive, the vacation property in Virginia, and her investment portfolio have been transferred into an irrevocable trust. Desmond took a step forward. A trust. Okay, well, who controls the trust? I am the eldest grandson. It has to be me. David finally smiled. It was not a nice smile. The sole trustee with full power of attorney and absolute discretion over all disbursements is Ms. Kamara Miller. The room erupted in whispers. I saw the CEO of Delta Airlines nod in approval. He knew what that meant. It meant I held the keys to the kingdom. No, Desmond screamed. No, that is impossible. She is broke. She cannot manage an estate. She can barely pay her rent. David looked at me. I nodded. Actually, Mr. Miller, David continued, that brings me to the second matter of business. He pulled another file from his bag. This one was red. My client, Ms. Kamara Miller, instructed me to perform a full audit of the family's liabilities to ensure the estate was secure. During that audit, we discovered some interesting financial anomalies regarding your personal accounts. Desmond's face went white. He looked at Tiffany. Tiffany was chewing on her lips so hard it was bleeding. It appears David said, reading from the file, that you are currently in default on your home mortgage, you are 3 months behind on your car payments, and your combined credit card debt across 4 institutions totals $85,000. Desmond tried to laugh, but it came out as a choke. That is temporary cash flow. I am getting a bonus next month. David ignored him. Because your debt was categorized as distressed, the bank was looking to offload the risk. My client, acting through her holding company, Velvet Inc. Global, purchased your debt portfolio this morning. Desmond blinked. I do not understand. I stepped forward. I took the microphone from David. Let me explain it in simple terms. Desmond, I said, I own your debt. I am your bank. I walked down the steps of the stage until I was standing inches away from my brother. He smelled of sweat and fear. You see, Desmond, when you were busy adding me to that group chat to make fun of my car, I was busy buying the loan on yours. When you were laughing about my thrift store clothes, I was buying the mortgage on the house you sleep in. I leaned in closer. You are insolvent, brother. You are broke. And because I am the new creditor, I have the right to call in the loan immediately if I suspect the borrower is engaging in reckless spending. I gestured to the lavish ballroom, the flowers, the champagne tower. And spending $50,000 on a party you cannot afford, I would call that reckless. Desmond looked around the room, pleading with his eyes for someone to help him. But nobody moved. They were witnessing a financial execution. So here is the deal, I said, my voice hard as diamond. You have 24 hours. 24 hours for what he whispered. To pay me, I said. I want the $85,000 in credit card debt paid in full, by tomorrow at midnight. Desmond's knees buckled. He grabbed onto a chair to stay upright. I do not have that kind of money. You know I do not. I looked at Tiffany. She was shrinking into herself, trying to become invisible. Then I suggest you start liquidating assets, I said. I looked pointedly at the gold-sequined dress she was wearing. I looked at the diamond earrings that I knew were put on a credit card. I looked at the designer clutch in her hand. Tiffany, I said, you like nice things, do not you? You like the status. You like the labels. Tiffany stared at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her professional makeup. You have a closet full of Birkin bags. Do not you? I asked. And those Louboutins you are wearing, and the Rolex on Desmond's wrist. I checked my watch. If I were you, I would start listing them on eBay right now. Because if I do not see that money in my account by midnight tomorrow, I am initializing foreclosure proceedings on your house, and I will have your cars repossessed. Tiffany let out a wail. You cannot take my house. Where will we live? I shrugged, the same way she had shrugged when she told me to clean the floors. Maybe you can find a nice apartment, I said. Or maybe you can stay in a hotel. Oh wait, you cannot. Your credit cards are frozen. I turned back to the crowd. The guests were silent, but their eyes were wide with respect. They understood the language of power. They understood that I hadn't just won. I had dominated. Desmond grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, desperate. Kamara, please. We are family. You cannot do this to family. We have nowhere to go. I looked at his hand on my arm until he let go. Family, I asked. The family that called me a charity case for 9 years. The family that bet on my divorce. I shook my head. You are right, Desmond. Charity starts at home. And unfortunately for you, I am closing the charity. I turned to David. Mr. Sterling, please hand them the formal notice of demand. David handed Desmond a thick envelope. Desmond took it like it was a death sentence. You have 24 hours, I repeated. Tick-tock, Desmond. Tick-tock. I turned my back on them. I walked over to Grandma Hattie, who was beaming with pride. Shall we cut the cake now? I asked her. Grandma Hattie laughed. I think that would be lovely. Behind me, I heard the sound of Tiffany sobbing and Desmond arguing with David. But it sounded distant like noise from a television in another room. I did not care anymore. I had my dignity. I had my grandmother. And I had the receipts. As the waiter brought out the massive cake, I looked over my shoulder one last time. Tiffany was looking at her clutch, realizing she would have to sell it to pay for her husband's mistakes. It was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. The sun rose over Atlanta, painting the skyline in gold, but for the Miller household it was a morning of absolute darkness. I sat on the balcony of my penthouse, sipping a cup of Blue Mountain coffee. My phone sat on the glass table, vibrating violently. It had been ringing non-stop since 6 in the morning. I finally picked it up. It was an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. Hello, I said, my voice calm and rested. Kamara. The voice on the other end was a wet, desperate rasp. It was Tiffany. She sounded like she had been crying for hours, or perhaps screaming. Kamara, please do not hang up. You have to listen to me. I am at a payphone. Desmond cut off my cell service. He is losing his mind. I took a sip of coffee. Good morning, Tiffany. How is the packing going? You have 14 hours left. Kamara, please, she sobbed. This is a mistake. You have to understand. I never wanted to treat you that way. It was Desmond. He made me do it. He was so jealous of you. He told me that if I was nice to you, he would leave me. I was a victim too, Kamara. I was scared of him. I listened to her lies. They were slippery and pathetic. This was the woman who had mocked my clothes in the thrift store. This was the woman who had laughed when she spilled wine on me. And now, faced with the consequences of her own cruelty, she was throwing her husband under the bus to save herself. He forced me to write those texts, she continued, her voice rising in hysteria. He made me bet on your divorce. He said it would make him feel better. Kamara, we are sisters. You know how men can be. Please just call off the debt collectors. I will leave him. I swear I will. Just let me keep the house. I smiled. It was a cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. You are recording this call, aren't you? I asked, hoping to use it against him in divorce court. There was a pause, then a stammer. No, I just want you to know the truth. Well, Tiffany, I said, I believe in transparency. Just like at the party. I hung up. Immediately, I went into my call log. I selected the recording of the last 3 minutes. I attached the file to a text message. I addressed it to Desmond Miller. I added a simple caption. Your wife seems to think you are the problem. Thought you should know who you are sharing a foxhole with. I hit send. I set the phone down and watched the birds fly over the city. I didn't need to be in that suburban house to know what was happening. I could imagine the ping on Desmond's phone. I could imagine him pressing play. I could imagine the look on his face as he heard the woman he had gone into debt to impress, the woman he had bullied his own sister for betraying him for a chance at salvation. 5 minutes later, my assistant Sarah called. Ms. Miller, she said. The police scanner just picked up a domestic disturbance call at the Oak Creek address. Neighbors reported shouting and objects being thrown through windows. I nodded. It appears the snake is eating its own tail. But that was just the private destruction. The public destruction was far more efficient. Sarah continued. And regarding the social media strategy, the video from the party is trending on Twitter and TikTok. The hashtag charity case is #1, but not in the way they think. I opened my laptop. The video of Tiffany screaming at me on stage, her face contorted with rage, calling me a bitch while I stood there calmly, had 5 million views. But it wasn't just that clip. My team had released the B-roll footage from the live stream Tiffany herself had filmed. It showed her snapping her fingers at the waiters. It showed her making fun of the guests she thought were poor. It showed her making a comment about how she didn't want dark-skinned people ruining the aesthetic of her photos. The internet had done the rest. I scrolled through the comments. User 1 wrote, "This woman is a monster. I went to high school with her. She has always been a bully." User 2 wrote, "I just called the boutique where she claims to be a VIP. They said they are banning her for life." User 3 wrote, "I work for the HOA in her neighborhood. We are launching an investigation into her conduct. Tiffany Miller wasn't just broke, she was cancelled. She was a pariah. The social status she valued more than oxygen had been stripped away overnight. She would walk into a grocery store and people would spit at her feet." I closed the laptop. The war was over. The enemy wasn't just defeated, they were destroying each other in the ruins. I finished my coffee. It tasted exceptionally good today. I had a meeting with my architect in an hour to discuss the new wing I was adding to Grandma Hattie's favorite charity center. Life was moving on, and the Millers were just a cautionary tale in my rearview mirror. 2 days after the party, the private elevator that opened directly into my penthouse foyer chimed softly. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. From up here, the cars looked like toys, and the people looked like ants. It was a perspective I had grown used to. A perspective that made the petty dramas of my family seem insignificant. The elevator doors slid open. My mother, Loretta, stepped out. She stopped dead in her tracks. She was clutching her handbag against her chest, as if it contained the last of her dignity. Her eyes, usually so critical and sharp, were wide with shock. She looked at the Italian marble floors. She looked at the crystal chandelier that hung like a frozen waterfall in the center of the room. She looked at the original Basquiat painting hanging on the far wall. She looked small. For the first time in my life, the woman who had dominated my existence, who had made me feel like I took up too much space, looked absolutely tiny. "Kamara," she whispered. Her voice echoed slightly in the vast open space. "Oh my lord, this is where you live." I turned around slowly. I was wearing a silk robe that cost more than her car. I did not offer her a drink. I did not offer her a seat. "Hello, Mom," I said. She took a few tentative steps forward, reaching out to touch the back of a velvet armchair as if testing to see if it was real. "I had no idea," she said, shaking her head. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think you were struggling?" I took a sip of my water. "Because if I had told you, you would have loved the money, not me." She flinched, but she recovered quickly. The survival instinct in Loretta Miller was strong. She put on a smile, a shaky, tearful smile that I had seen her use to charm deacons at church. "Oh, baby," she said, walking toward me with her arms open. "We made mistakes, I admit that. Desmond. He twisted things. He made me think you were irresponsible. But I am your mother. I love you. And seeing you here all alone in this big empty house, it breaks my heart." She stopped just a few feet away from me. "You need someone to take care of you, Kamara. You are working so hard. I can see it in your eyes. You need a home-cooked meal. You need your mama." I watched her. I watched the gears turning in her head. She was already measuring the windows for curtains. She was already picking out which guest room would be hers. She was already calculating how she could brag to her friends about living in the penthouse. "So here is what I was thinking." She continued, her voice gaining confidence. "I can move in, just for a while. I can manage the staff for you. I can cook. I can make this place feel like a home. You shouldn't be alone, Kamara. Family belongs together." I laughed. It was a soft sound, but it stopped her cold. "Move in?" I asked. "Mom, 2 days ago you told me I wasn't allowed to sit at the main table because I would ruin the aesthetic. And now you want to live in my sanctuary?" I walked over to the kitchen island. There was a small white envelope sitting on the marble counter. I picked it up. "I am not going to let you be homeless, Mom," I said, "because unlike you, I do not enjoy seeing family suffer." Her eyes lit up. She reached for the envelope, but I continued pulling it back slightly. "You are not living here. You are never living here. This home is for people who believed in me when I was driving a Honda. This home is for people who saw my value when I had nothing in my bank account." I handed her the envelope. She opened it frantically. Inside was a bank book for a savings account. "There is $50,000 in there," I said. "It is enough to rent a nice, modest one-bedroom apartment in Decatur for a year. It is enough for groceries. It is enough for bingo night." "50,000?" she asked, looking at the number. "But, Kamara, look at this place. You have millions. You could buy me a house." "I could," I agreed. "But I won't. Because that money is a gift, not an obligation. And frankly, Mom, $50,000 is a very generous severance package for a mother who failed at her job." Her face crumbled. "Kamara, please, do not be like this. I am old. I do not want to be alone." "Then you should have thought about that when you were betting on my divorce," I said. I pressed the button on the wall to call the elevator. "The money is yours, Mom. But my life, my peace, that belongs to me. And I am not sharing it with anyone who views me as a retirement plan." The elevator doors opened. I gestured toward them. "Goodbye, Mom. Enjoy the apartment. I hear Decatur is lovely this time of year." She looked at me one last time. She saw the steel in my eyes. She realized that the daughter she could manipulate was gone, replaced by a woman made of iron. She clutched the bank book to her chest, lowered her head, and walked into the elevator. I watched the doors close, cutting off her sobbing face. The silence returned to the penthouse. It wasn't empty, it was full. It was full of peace. I turned back to the window and watched the city below, finally free. The Mediterranean sun felt different than the sun in Atlanta. It did not burn, it kissed. I sat on the teak deck of the private yacht, watching the sapphire blue water churn into white foam as we cut through the waves off the coast of Amalfi. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of salt and lemon groves. For the first time in 32 years, the air did not taste like anxiety. It tasted like freedom. Sitting across from me, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized designer sunglasses, was Grandma Hattie. She was no longer the frail woman in the wheelchair. She was vibrant. She was laughing as she tapped her foot to the Italian music playing softly from the speakers. She held a glass of fresh orange juice in her hand, looking out at the horizon with the peace of someone who had finally escaped a burning building. "This is the life, Hattie," she said to herself, adjusting her silk scarf. "I should have written that new will 10 years ago." I smiled, turning the page of my book. "Better late than never, Grandma. Besides, if you had done it 10 years ago, I would not have had the pleasure of seeing Tiffany's face when the security guard dragged her out." Grandma chuckled. "That was a highlight. I still watch that video sometimes when I need a good laugh. Did you hear she is working at a diner in Alabama now?" I nodded. "I heard. And Desmond is driving for a rideshare app. Apparently his credit score is still too low to lease a car, so he has to rent one by the week." It was harsh, perhaps, but it was fair. They had spent a decade trying to break me. I simply stopped holding them together. My phone buzzed on the small table between us. I usually kept it on silent, but I was waiting for a call from Julian about a new bill he was passing. I picked it up. It wasn't Julian. The number was unsaved, but I recognized the area code. It was a message from a prepaid burner phone. I opened it. The text read, "Kamara, it is Desmond. Please do not ignore this. I know I messed up. I am sorry. Really. But things are bad. The car rental place is going to cut me off. Can I just borrow $500? I swear I will pay you back. Please, sis. I am family." I stared at the screen. $500. The man who had mocked my Honda Civic. The man who had bragged about first-class tickets to Europe. The man who had bet $100 that my husband would leave me. He was reduced to begging for scraps from the sister he had called a charity case. I looked at the water. I thought about the years of insults. I thought about the exclusion. I thought about the pain. Then I looked at Grandma Hattie living her best life in the sun. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad. I felt absolutely nothing. The bond was not just broken, it was dissolved. I tapped the screen. I did not type a reply. I did not ask how he was. I simply pressed block caller. Then I deleted the message thread. The phone went back onto the table. Who was that? Grandma asked, peering over her sunglasses. Just a spam number, I said, picking up my drink. Someone trying to sell something I do not need. Grandma nodded. Good. Do not let them bother you. We have important decisions to make. She pointed a manicured finger at the map lying on the table. So, CEO, she said. Where to next, Monaco? Or should we go to Greece? I hear the sunsets in Santorini are to die for. I looked at her. I looked at the vast open ocean ahead of us. There were no walls. There were no ceilings. There were no family group chats filled with hate. Let's go to Greece, I said. I think you would look great in blue and white. Grandma clinked her glass against mine. Greece it is. As the yacht turned toward the east, catching the wind, I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. They called me the charity case for 9 years. And as I sat there surrounded by the wealth I had built and the grandmother I had saved, I realized they were right. I was a charity case. I had given them the charity of my silence. I had given them the charity of my patience. And in the end, I had given them the ultimate charity. I did not send them to prison for fraud. I did not sue them for emotional distress. I simply let them live with the consequences of their own actions. But as of today, the charity is closed, the account is empty, and my generosity has officially hit its limit. I opened my eyes and looked at the horizon. The future was bright, it was expensive, and best of all, it was entirely mine. This story teaches us that your value is never determined by how your family treats you. Blood may connect us, but respect and loyalty are what make a true family. Kamara showed us that the best revenge is not screaming or fighting, but simply removing your access, your energy, and your resources from people who do not appreciate them. When you finally stop trying to buy their love with your silence, you realize that you were never the broken one. You were the bank, and it is okay to close the vault. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to know that walking away from toxic family is not an act of weakness. It is an act of survival. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let anyone treat you like a discount when you know you are a luxury.